to gathering some important information today. So the main purpose is to examine the extent to which ARRA is maximizing job creation and economic growth in California. To this end, we've invited transportation agencies at different levels of government throughout the state to talk about the status of obligating and, more importantly, awarding ARRA funds. In addition to discussing the status, I've asked participants to talk about any barriers that exist to implementing ARRA and how those barriers were or could be overcome. Finally, we've asked the agency to present recommendations to ensure the implementation of any future federal stimulus funds continues to maximize job creation while also meeting the mobility and environmental goals the state has. So our main focus here is to understand what the state can do to ensure that future federal funds are spent quickly and to create a maximum number of jobs. Are there changes to bureaucratic processes that may streamline project delivery? Should state policy focus on particular types of projects or a specific allocation formula? I'd like to start with Jessica Giambattista with the Legislative Analyst's Office to present the LAO's report and use of ARRA funds. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Senator Huff. Jessica Giambattista with the Analyst's Office. Fighting off a little bit of a cold, so let me know if you need me to speak up. Thank you for having us here today to talk about ARRA. Last November, our office came out with this report using federal economic stimulus funds for transportation. And in the report, we provided a status update on the ARRA transportation programs. Today we have a handout for you that pulls some of the key information from this report as well as provides some updated numbers on the status of the programs. Before I talk about the state's use of funds, though, I want to highlight on page 1 of the handout the different steps required in the federal funding process and some of the deadlines established by ARRA to meet these different steps. First is the certification of projects. This is essentially a list or a plan for projects that local agencies and Caltrans would plan to fund with ARRA funds. The second step is obligation of funds. This is the actual commitment of funds, a specific amount of funds to specific projects. The obligation does have a deadline under ARRA. Specifically, ARRA requires that all of the state's funds be obligated by March 2nd of this year. Funds that are not obligated at that time will be lost and redistributed to other states. After funds are obligated, project sponsors are then able to advertise a contract. The advertisement period typically is anywhere from 30 to 90 days, depending on the size of the project. When the advertisement has ended, a contractor will be selected, and at that point is when you really start to see some of the stimulus effect of funding a particular project. A contractor would know that they have the job, they know how much they're going to be paid, what work they're doing, and how long they're going to be doing the project for. They can start to mobilize their equipment and hire up the staff that they would need for that project. After this, they would then go out and start to build the project and be paid on a monthly basis for the work that's been done. This is the expenditure of funds. It's not until this point that money is actually flowing into the state, since this is all funded on a reimbursement basis. So in terms of evaluating the stimulus effect and not just meeting the ARRA requirements, we think it's important that you focus on when contracts are being awarded and then when funds are being actually spent. On page 2 of the handout, we summarize the state's implementation of ARRA highway and road funds as specified in AB 3X20. ARRA required a minimum of 30% of funds to be sub-allocated or shared with local agencies. However, because local agencies in California have substantial transportation needs, and because they indicated that they had many ready-to-go projects, AB 3X20 provides a greater share of funds to local agencies than what the minimum was required under ARRA. Specifically, local agencies received about $1.6 billion of the $2.6 billion in ARRA funds. AB 3X20 also specifies that Caltrans' share of funds be used for highway repair projects in the State Highway Operation and Protection Program, or SHOP program. Additionally, it authorized Caltrans to make cash loans to Proposition 1B projects that were ready for construction but couldn't proceed due to the state's inability to sell bonds a year ago. On page 3 of the handout, you can see that Caltrans is moving quickly to get projects underway. As of last week, Caltrans had obligated all of its ARRA funds. That relates back to that March 2nd deadline. Caltrans has also put out to bid most of the projects that it plans to use ARRA funds on and has awarded contracts for 80% of those funds. Local agencies, on the other hand, have been slower to get projects underway, as you can see on page 4 of the handout. As of last week, Caltrans reports that local agencies have obligated $1.2 billion, or 72% of their funds. The remaining $455 million must be obligated by March 2nd of this year, otherwise these funds will be lost. Of these funds, contracts have been awarded for 354 projects using $726 million in ARRA funds, or 45% of the local share of funds. While we were preparing our report last year, we talked to a sampling of local agencies to determine why they might be experiencing a relatively slower progress as compared to Caltrans. We didn't find any one hard and fast answer to this, but some of the agencies did indicate that their projects were not necessarily truly shovel-ready or weren't truly shovel-ready to be funded federally. In addition, some of the local agencies indicated that they didn't have a lot of experience in using federal funds and were unfamiliar with the process, and this slowed them down in their use of funds.
I'm going to ask a real quick clarifying question here,
Sure.
if you don't mind. You have some data here on 72% of Caltrans, 45% of locals awarding contracts. How do you come by that data?
That's based on the reporting that's required under ARRA, and the information is all funneled through Caltrans.
Okay, because we just had some late-breaking contract award data that we got from Caltrans, right? And so we'll just stipulate for the record, they're showing now a state is 66% awarded and 55% on the regional. So that's the latest information I have. I just wanted to, so we're getting from the same source, so we should be.
Yeah, our data is from Caltrans as
And we'll
well.
check with Randy later on when he's up here just to clarify that. Thank you. Go ahead.
He's saying awarded, though. It's different. Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges overall with ARRA is that there's a number of different reports, and so making sure that we're all looking at the same data, I think, is very important, Senator. Anyways, we found that there wasn't really one clear, hard and fast reason why the local agencies were overall slower to use their funds, but there were a number of indications that maybe there were certain things holding them up, that they just didn't have projects. Maybe their project may have been ready to go to be funded with state funds or local funds, but it wasn't in the federal program, or maybe didn't have the federal environmental clearance but only had the state level. And so there's certain extra requirements that had to be met, and that took additional time. To further evaluate the progress, we recommended in our report that the legislature hold oversight hearings such as the one that you're holding today. We recommend that the legislature determine why local agencies have been slower to use their funds and if changes could be made to help expedite their projects. We also recommend that you try to determine why funding SHOP projects, the Caltrans projects, has been so successful, and if there's some recipe for success there that could be replicated and used to help the locals to expedite their projects, or in the possibility that there is additional stimulus funding coming to the state. Regarding potential stimulus funding, Stimulus 2, we recommend that this committee direct Caltrans and local agencies to prepare for the possibility that there will be a Stimulus 2. To do so, Caltrans should identify the advantages and disadvantages of funding different types of projects, such as large projects versus small projects. The federal funds are more administratively cumbersome to use than some state and local funds, and it might make sense to try and target these funds to larger projects. There could also be different advantages and disadvantages in terms of job creation depending on the types of projects, and we think that you should have Caltrans report on that. We also think that Caltrans should report on which agencies in the state have more experience using federal funds and how that would help them to expedite the use of additional stimulus funds that the state might get. Specifically, we also recommend that you direct Caltrans and local agencies to develop a list of projects, specific projects that could be funded if there's additional stimulus funding to the state. These projects should be shovel-ready or very near shovel-ready. They should be in the federal program, and they should meet all federal requirements and have full funding of the project. While ARRA does not require matching funds, if the amount of funding going to a project doesn't fully fund it, then an agency or project sponsor would still need additional funds in order to fully fund the project and award a contract. And so any project that's planned to be used for additional stimulus funds should cover all of those bases to make sure the projects really are ready to go. be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. And one of your recommendations is Caltrans drop a list of specific projects that are shovel-ready. So we've heard that term thrown around a lot, and we have different percentage of awarding contracts to, quote, shovel-ready, unquote, projects. Would you define for us what shovel-ready is?
By shovel-ready, we mean that the project has completed its environmental certification and clearance and is signed off on and has an environmental document signed off on, and that the project is fully designed with its final design, or a project that is very close to fully designed and could be completed within the next few weeks or months, depending on when the stimulus funds were to be available.
Okay. All right.
Essentially ready to go out and put together a bid package and put the project out to bid.
So you think that the delay in, or the difference in awarding contracts versus we're obligated up, that's not a problem. So it's awarding the contracts, and you believe the delay is because of the lack of experience with the local level of dealing with the federal requirements, partly degree.
It wasn't clear. When we were putting together the report last year, we did talk to a sampling of local agencies, and we heard a variety of different reasons. That was one of the ones that we heard more often than not. But there wasn't any one clear reason why, which led to our recommendation that you hold this hearing and other hearings like this to bring in some of the local agencies and see if there's something else that they feel is hindering their progress. We've also talked with Caltrans staff who are working on the AURA program in their local assistance side, and they've indicated that there's just certain procedures and the timelines may just be longer for some local projects given just all the different steps that they have to take to complete a project. And so this wasn't something that was made very clear, I think, at the time that AB 3X20 was being passed. There was definitely an indication that projects would be able to move quickly, that local agencies felt like they had a lot of projects that were ready to go, and that it would create a stimulus, perhaps more of a stimulus by funding those projects. And so since that doesn't appear to have happened yet, we just think that this committee should follow up on that and see if there's something that Caltrans can do to expedite the process or something the legislature can do.
Is there anything else you've identified that would facilitate the process? Because we understand it would be a shorter timeline should they come up with money in the future.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't clear to us why the local agencies were moving more slowly. I think the funding the SHOP projects and funding the Prop 1B projects seemed to be a successful approach. Mm-hmm. And so if there's very short timelines, if there's another round of stimulus funding, if it worked once, it could likely work again, but obviously you'd want to determine why that was successful as well and see if the reasons for success there could be expanded upon so that other agencies would be able to move more quickly with their funds.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we're pleased to welcome Senator Pavley. Thank you, Pavley. Senator Pavley, you have any questions or comments?
Maybe just to clarify, and apologize for being late, and I haven't read through the materials you just passed out. There were quite a few Caltrans projects that were shovel-ready and ready to go out the door. Passed all the environmental reviews, no problems that way.
That's our understanding, yes.
Just in general terms, what percentage actually moved forward? I mean, we had this urgency in front of the legislature to do everything we could to push them out the door, and I was curious what percentage projects actually were able to move forward.
In terms of the Caltrans project?
Yes.
As of last week, Caltrans has not only obligated and advertised, but awarded contracts for 80% of their projects, or 73 projects using $771 million in funds.
And that's a good segue to bring Randy up here to talk about that, because
Perfect.
We got some newer data that indicates a lower percentage, and we need to...
Maybe that's my confusion.
Yeah, we need to explore that as well. So thank you very much. Unless you have any further questions, we're good, and then we'll ask the Director of Caltrans, Randy Iwasaki, to come on up. And his team. And if you want to just start off the bat with addressing that difference in percentage, that would clear that up, and then you can move on to the rest of your presentation.
I'm going to have Earl. I'll have Earl. It's the way the money is shifted between a locally funded Recovery Act project and a state-funded Recovery Act. Sometimes the locals will put money on a state project, so it's confusing. And that's the difficulty of tracking the dollars, is because you have, and I can tell you this, I'll tell you the story after he gets to it, but the way the legislation split the dollars, 37.5%, or around $1 billion, went to the state, and then 62.5%, or about $1.6 billion, went to the local agencies. Not all that money was spent on local projects, on local systems. Some of it was sent over to the state to fund state highway projects. So, can you?
Certainly. My name is Earl Seberg. Thank you. What has happened, essentially what Randy has said, is that these funds have been, once we hit to the project level, projects are funded from a variety of sources, including state Recovery Act funds, in some cases some of our, some of our SHOP projects, or a portion of the funding that came into a larger scope of work that was funded out of the regional shares. So that's why these funds have actually moved, or these percentages has actually moved around a little bit. When we look at this, we're looking at it at a high level from a program standpoint. We went back and looked at the details and provided that information this morning to your consultant on that. So that's why these things are moving around this late break. And we haven't had a chance to go back through this information with the LAO office.
Is this data that we have then accurate, that shows the state has awarded 66% of its contracts in the regions, 55%? Is that the latest that you have?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Go ahead and fire at will, sir.
Chairman Huff.
Start on the rest of your presentation. Yeah, exactly.
Senator Pavley, it's nice to be here this afternoon. I'm going to tell you a story and how it kind of worked out to kind of answer some of your questions, and then we'd be ready to answer the rest of your questions. But Recovery Act, $2.57 billion for highway, $1.068 billion for transit. We took the $2.57 billion, thank you for the legislation, split it 37.5%, as I mentioned, 62.5%. Normally, 70% comes to the state, 30% goes to the regions. We split it up using a modified STIP formula on the 1.6 to the local agency side. On the state side, we decided that through the legislation that $625 million went to fund 57 SHOP projects, State Highway Operation and Protection Plan projects. We also funded 4 stalled bond projects, the 24 Alameda, 24 the Caldecott Tunnel, and we're going to break ground on that here at the end of this week. We funded the 805 in San Diego. The 215, an $800 million corridor project, we use Recovery Act dollars on that modernizes the north-south route in San Bernardino. Once that's done, Mayor Morris's redevelopment plan, add more jobs, can redevelop the city of San Bernardino. And then the last project is a small project in Los Angeles, the 405 HOV lane. It's a $950 million project. So 4 bond projects that were stalled. Ultimately, when those projects are finished and bonds are sold, the $310 million will come back to the shop in the future. The 57 original projects have grown because of bid savings. And so last year, the State Highway Operation and Protection Program, a $1.6 billion program, $1.2 billion in revenue. We had a shelf. And so we took that money, we fully funded last year's shop savings, and then additional revenue roll over into this year. Same thing this year, $1.6 billion shop program, $1.4 billion or $1.2 billion in revenue, fully fund this year's shop. And so we have now 83 projects that we've identified, not the split funded, but 83 projects in the shop that we're going to fund. We have 2 projects that we haven't awarded yet. Is it awarded or obligated? Awarded. Obligated. Doyle Drive. Contract 4, Doyle Drive,
yep.
And then I-5 down in District 7 or Los Angeles. So that's the situation with the Recovery Act. And I stand ready to answer any of your questions.
Okay, I'd like to recognize Senators Kehoe and Oropeza having joined us. Welcome. And any of you have questions before I ask a few?
Go ahead.
All right, sure.
Thank you.
We have a lower percent of awarding contracts at the local level as opposed to the state. We'd like to see a little bit higher. It is what it is from the processes you got to jump through or whatever. What is the reason you think why the state is more successful at jumping through these hoops than the local agencies are?
I think we had a laundry list of shelved projects that didn't have funding, but we had delivered them based on our SHOP program. That helped us. We also had a list of bond-funded projects that were delivered. I wouldn't call it shovel-ready, but they were, I guess by definition that Jessica laid out, they were shovel-ready.
Are shelves and shovels the same for our purposes of discussion?
I think so.
Shelf-ready?
Shelf-ready.
Well, you have the
shovel.
plans to do the project.
On the shelf, shovel
Ready to go.
Just needed money.
So you had the four bond projects that were nearing the end of the design process. And so the local agencies are doing everything they can to deliver the dollars because they don't want to give any of that money back either. And so we're here through our district local assistance engineers ready to help them anyway, but they actually have a different, the same process. It has to go through the federal process, but they also have to go to their boards or their city councils to get approval. And you'll hear more from, I notice there's some local agencies, and I don't want to get into their process, but they have a little more to do than, we're delegated a lot of the authority. They also come to us in order to get what we call an E76. That's an approval. They show the department that the plans are ready, the environmental document is done, it's in the FTIP, the federal tip, so that it's programmed properly. Everything's done, and then we submit that forward to the Federal Highway Administration for approval. In our case, we go directly to the Federal Highway Administration for approval for an E76. So there's an interim step there that we help and you could say help or add a little bit of time. But ultimately, that's a process that we don't have to go through that they do.
Is there anything that we as a state, you as Caltrans more specifically, because this is your expertise, is there anything we can do to help facilitate and accelerate the locals spending their money? We've got it obligated, now we got to get contracted and get the money actually spent because we're up against a timeline on that.
I think what we're trying to do is expedite every project as soon as we get it. And the problem, like in December, we ended up, at least at Caltrans, we got about 180 projects to process in that one time frame. So one of the things that in the future, if there's a STEM 2 or a Jobs for Main Street bill, that if we could level out that workload, it would help. You don't get a peak at the end. But it's a federal process, so I'm not really sure how the state legislature would help, other than the legislation that helped pass the dollars down very efficiently and very effectively.
Are the furloughs negatively impacting
That was my
your
question.
duty in getting this done quickly and timely?
Engineers.
Understanding this is a sensitive answer, but nevertheless, sometimes we need to understand fully what's going on.
We're doing everything we can to ensure that the furloughs do not create a problem for project delivery. And so what we do is we put those key people on we move them off a standard furlough onto an extended, self-directed extended, so that they bank that time and they take it off later. What I tell our team is that we're part of the economic solution by putting projects out. And so we're doing everything we can to get those projects out, get them processed, and get them in the hands of a contractor so we can create and retain jobs.
So if I understood that answer, you have some internal procedures you're doing to make sure that it's not slowing down our application process.
Absolutely, because as soon as the economy recovers, the sooner everybody's going to benefit.
Can I rephrase that
Yeah,
question?
go ahead.
Just for the fun of it. If you didn't have furloughs, would it be fair to say some of these projects could have gone out the door in a more timely manner, easier, especially given the backlog of projects you had been facing?
I don't think that even if we were not under a furlough program and we had 180 projects come into the office at the same time, it wouldn't matter. The process is that we address each project when they we're talking about local projects now.
Right.
When they enter into our local assistance engineers' hands, they do everything they can to process that paper so that it gets to the Federal Highway Administration to get approval. I don't control the Federal Highway's time frame to give us an E76, to process the certifications. We don't, or obligations. We don't control that, but everything on our end is expedited to try to get their projects, the local agency projects, out of our hands and into the Federal Highway Administration's hands as soon as we can.
And Caltrans projects not slowed down at all with furloughs?
We're doing everything we can to keep our program on schedule.
I think I've got the message.
Okay, the next question is, to the degree that we were looking for on-the-shelf, shovel-ready projects, we've probably captured the low-hanging fruit on projects ready to go. If we get another set of federal money, as we hope to, stimulus money, are we going to be able to do it on a more compressed time frame? It seems like there will be some constraints in obligating the funds even within a shorter period of time, and particularly in then contracting those funds out.
Last week I was in Washington, D.C. I sat next to Chairman Oberstar at the Mineta Transportation Institute board meeting. I went over our process and the local agencies' process to award contracts. I think he has a better understanding that a 90-day award timeframe is maybe unrealistic for us and even more so problematic for local agencies. We're going to send him a timeline. I also was able to meet with the Environmental and Public Works, what do you call that, committee. It's Chairman Boxer's committee, and they're going to take that jobs for Main Street and add or subtract. And I explained to them the things that we want if we're going to have a Jobs 2, a STEM 2 bill. You know, one of our problems is it's very difficult to award 90 days. California state law requires a 3-week ad. I can ask Federal Highways to do a 1-week ad, but what happens on a more complex project is the contractors don't have time to put together a good bid, and so you get a 3-week bid or you get a 1-week bid. Tack on all these projects that are coming in the same time, and you're hitting the same vendors. You could end up reducing the amount of competition, et cetera, and get poorer bids. And so what we're trying to do is extend out that to more realistic 120 days to award. The other thing is the state highway account is reducing, and so this is you have to spend and then get reimbursed. And so as the state highway account drops, and I would imagine some local agency coffers as well, their highway accounts, it becomes more problematic to put these projects and pay somebody when your bank account is going lower and then wait for a receipt to pay somebody else additional. So what I asked for is, in lieu of the way it's set up, why don't you initiate a grant program? And that didn't get very much traction at all.
Follow up on that? Just on that point, is there anything that can be done to help with that particular problem? That
90 to 120 days?
I mean, you know, you outlined the problem and you didn't get much traction back there on one potential solution. Are there other? I mean, I'm concerned about what you said about the account, the state highway account being so low that we may be, in essence, missing the boat on some stuff because we can't do it. We don't have the resources to do it without having upfront money. The grant idea didn't work. We know why the state highway account is so low, and it's not a really good reason. It seems like the kind of thing that we ought to look at, Mr. Chairman, in terms of maybe shifting some of the deck chairs. I mean, because we're losing resources. We're losing the opportunity to get this federal money if we don't. Is there any other angle at this that you are looking at to try and? It's sad when we're losing money because we can't. And then what is the time frame on actually that turnaround on the receding, the receding process and then getting the reimbursement?
The Federal Highway Trust Fund is also going down as well, and so during the last problem when the safety lieu lapsed, and we went on a month-to-month payment plan, there was talk that as they drew down the Highway Trust Fund that we weren't going to get paid back almost instantaneously. It works when we bill and we get paid. We get billed and we get paid. What happens, what was being contemplated was we'll accrue some bills and then we'll pay you in 2 separate installments. So as that happens, then you start whipsawing the state highway account. And so when we bill, we want to get paid. When we bill, we want to get paid. That's the best way it works. If you start going to 2 installments a month, we're going to run into problems. So far, that hasn't been a problem for us.
It hasn't?
No.
So we haven't lost
any federal money. Absolutely not. what we're looking at and what the question was is if there's a STEM 2 bill, what are some of the things that we would need? That is one of the things that and I'm not saying the bill isn't crafted yet. And so they heard what I had to say about this grant program. The only reason why I said it didn't gain much traction is that's not normally the way they do business.
Yeah.
How are we dealing with the future, because we don't have a shelf, is at the last California Transportation Commission, well, currently we have almost $2 billion worth of bond-funded projects shelf ready. Not all of those projects, and don't quote me on that number, it's somewhere around $2 billion. Not all those projects went through the NEPA or the federal process, and so if it went through CEQA or it's funded out of Proposition 1B and other funds, not federal, the documentation isn't correct. So those are automatically out unless for some miraculous reason the federal government says we'll recognize the CEQA process. I doubt it, but if they do, that would be great. But these projects that we call STEM 2 eligible, what they voted at the commission using some innovative language was that if other monies appear, then you can swap that money out. And that's around a little less than $400 million of bond funds, which leverages a little over $1 billion worth of projects.
Well, okay, that helps.
So we're doing everything we can from a state perspective. We have a lot of different types of money. That's just not a Caltrans, but that's a region. It's a joint partnership on these huge projects. And so we are doing everything we possibly can within the law to get these projects ready to go for STEM 2 if a STEM 2 appears.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We through? Any other questions? Go ahead.
Well,
Natalie.
I had one just because you're here. My district includes the home of the 405 between the 10 and the 101. And since you brought that up as a project, just if you could provide me a little update. Is that completely funded? Construction starts July 12th and goes to 2012. Are all the funds in place through either 1B or federal monies to complete that?
Yes, we cannot advertise a project legally that does not have a full funding.
For all the phases?
Yes. Well, for the phase that the $950 million, you're talking about the construction cost of $700 and some odd million, that project is fully funded for construction. It's design build.
Right.
So one of the
design building. Yeah.
So one of the questions is you need to put the stimulus money on long, live, big projects. And then the next question is, why aren't you creating more jobs? Well, they take time to get under construction.
That's
you
right.
need to mobilize all this heavy equipment. In the case of design build, a lot of design work up front. Ultimately, then the contracting work kicks in, but it takes time. Versus you do an overlay, because one of the questions is, how do you put more people to work? You put a lot of people to work in a very short period of time when you do roadway rehab or projects like that, because you have the aggregate industry involved, you've got suppliers, you've got truckers, you've got all these different types of activities going on in a very short period of time, and they're out. But on the 405, it's taken a while to ramp up.
Right. So is STEM 2 more related to those long-term projects that take all that time, or more for the quick turnaround and jobs?
Well, if they go with a 90-day award, you're going to get what you get. You're going to get those projects that are very close to the end of their design phase or done with design, ready to be advertised. And so you'll get whatever projects are ready to go. As you extend that time frame out, then the states or the local agencies or the regions, we have more time to pick and choose different projects. But time frame has a lot to do with the type of flexibility that an owner has or a sponsoring agency has.
But you don't, maybe I'm missing something here, you don't have the ability to prioritize those that are overlays or the more simple projects that are put people to work right away rather than...
The other part of my answer to the what are you doing to get projects ready to go is we're looking at a different procurement method. So we could take a look at using, and I have this idea that on a rehabilitation project, the contractor really doesn't look at all 900 plan sheets or whatever they are. What they want to know is how the roadway is ultimately going to look from a plan, a cross-section, typical section view. How much material do you estimate is going to be needed on the project? Where in the world is it? So you've got a title sheet, you've got a typical, and you've got a summary of quantity, striping, asphalt, concrete, whatever the sections are, and then refer to our standard plans and put those projects out, because a competent mechanic can bid on those sets of plans and produce a good bid. So we're looking at expediting our design process where we have environmental clearance.
Couple of questions. Any questions? Okay. Is your definition of shovel-ready the same as the LAOs?
Yes.
Okay. And are you talking to the regions to identify other projects or find ways to facilitate? Because obviously, if you're constrained by 90 days and we're trying to get 120, they're going to be more constrained, at least according to our existing experience. So are you working proactively with them now?
Yes. We had a conference call with the regional agencies, and we talked about potential of jobs for Main Street or STEM 2. What do you have ready? We're ready to work with the regional agencies to make sure we do not lose any of the proposed Stimulus 2 or Jobs for Main Street money. That's the last thing we want to do in the state of California.
Okay, very good. Anything else?
I had one,
Yeah.
just thinking out your lineup of projects for STEM 2 and NEPA versus CEQA. Isn't there just, excuse my ignorance on this, but relatively minor differences? One is looking at alternatives and
Mitigating,
projects.
the difference in the nuances
Yes.
of the environmental documents is one, you mitigate for cumulative or impacts as a whole, and CEQA, you mitigate each impact.
Right.
That's different. Well, you know that, but the point is that it didn't go through the federal process. So you're not going to go and get an E76 to move from environmental to design because they haven't. The Federal Highway Administration hasn't authorized you to move that because there's no federal money.
Okay.
Mr. Director, thank you.
You're welcome.
And, we'll try to have some hotter questions for you next time, okay? No, I'm just...
Thanks.
And next we'll call up Michael Turner, David Yale, LA County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Michael Turner with the Metropolitan County, LA County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and I will be very brief and leave most of the presentation to David Yale. But I mainly wanted to say two things. One is that we think we've done a fairly good job of implementing ARA under the program we implemented at the board level. Probably underestimating that. I think we've done a very good job of implementing the first phase under AB 3X20 by Speaker Bass. We also think that it's a very good framework to move into the next phase of a stimulus bill should one come down from the federal level. And we would recommend using that same model to implement any second round of stimulus funds. So with that, I will turn it over to David, who will go through the presentation.
Welcome,
Thank you,
David.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm David Yale, Deputy Executive Officer for Regional Programming at the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. My first slide is actually unrelated to ARA, but it does show you another measure of how bad the economy is. Our quarter-over-quarter sales tax receipts are down 20% in some quarters. These sales tax declines are a key factor in transportation funding in Los Angeles County. Over two-thirds of our long-range plan is funded with sales taxes. So the economy is bad. The sales taxes coupled with the STA losses that we've had have forced us into a position where we will be reducing transit services next year in our FY11 budget. We don't have a choice. The ARRA has helped us. We've preserved jobs at transit operators and in the construction trades. The Recovery Act was a jobs preservation creation bill. As you've heard from other testifiers, it had strict use it or lose it provisions with redistribution between the counties and within states, between states. The Jobs for Main Street bill is much more difficult. The contract award in 90 days is very different than the grant award. And I'm going to go into a little bit about that difficulty.
Can you just, you said that using the stimulus funds, you've been able to help stave off, losing jobs and all that. Can you quantify that? Do you have a number?
Yeah, I do have several slides at the end of my presentation on the...
Then I'll cool my heels and wait for your presentation.
The slide here summarizes AB 3X20. The state acted very promptly in getting that legislation, and it was extremely helpful to California's success in the use of the RO1 funds. The summary for RO1 for Los Angeles County and California is shown on page 3, slides 5 and 6. You can see here that Los Angeles County had 14 different formula pots to program. All of them have different eligibility rules. In total, about $1.1 billion in highway and transit funds came to the 10 million people of Los Angeles County through ARRA. The Recovery Act funding in LA County was implemented very promptly by the MTA board. We had a much tighter deadline in LA County. 75 days is what we gave our grantees to get through the Caltrans process to grant award. As it turned out, most of them couldn't make it. But by the time the real deadline showed up from Caltrans, we did make it. 100% of our projects were obligated on time in Los Angeles County, and part of that was the get tough position that the MTA board took. We did lapse, I think, 1 or 2 cities who were unable to get a federally eligible job in the amount of time available. We gave about $320 million, I'm on slide 8, page 4 now, to the cities for road maintenance backlog. This was substantially higher than what was required by AB 3X20. The 90 cities that got money each received a minimum of $500,000. It doesn't make sense to do a federal job for less. And we awarded, right now we are awarding construction contracts at a rate of 1 every working day, and that rate is increasing because we are all the way through the Caltrans process at this point. I do want to spend a minute on the 405 since the senator is interested in that project.
All my constituents call every day, and your personal home phone number.
It was the ARRA which enabled us to go to bid on the design-build contract.
Okay, that's good to know.
Prop 1B at the time was not available in sufficient quantity to let us go issue that contract. This is the largest Prop 1B grant in the program, $730 million. We were able to reduce that grant to $614 million and use the federal funds to get the project underway. The cash flow assumed by the CTC today has Prop 1B funds sufficient to get us through March of 2011. If the treasurer does not issue bonds by December of 2010, we will be in a position where we will have to suspend that project.
Okay.
So the cash flow is funded.
You make sure I'm kept in any communication loop on that.
We will certainly do
issue.
that. It is keenly important that we get the Prop 1B bonds flowing again when we straighten out our budget.
So it's the cash flow and his ability to sell bonds. He's scheduled to sell them. That's not
the CTC and Caltrans, I think, responsibly have decided to go on a cash flow basis. That gets more projects out in the street and more projects are moving. The risk about it is that for very large projects like this, we could get in a bind. I want to move on to page 5, our slide 9 and 10. This is a point I think we need to make a lot about Los Angeles County. We're as big as the state of Michigan. We're not a regional MPO, and we are not a state DOT. So we have to go through SCAG and Caltrans and the FHWA or FTA to get through the grant process. And this is, I think, the principal reason there's a lag in local project delivery. It's a normal thing to have happening that a state DOT who works directly with the FHWA with delegated authority can get things done faster. Could the federal process be improved? I think that's one of the key purposes of the hearing today. We know that a minimum federal process is 22 weeks. And the summary of that is shown there: 4 weeks for the tip, 6 weeks for grant approval, 3 weeks to go to city council, 4 weeks to advertise, 3 weeks to open bids, and go back to council 2 weeks to execute the contract. A very tight schedule, 22 weeks. That means we are already behind the 8 ball here on RO2. If we're going to make 90-day schedule, we have to start now. The TIP has to be programmed now. We have to predict in Los Angeles County, again, a county the size of Michigan, what we're going to get before Congress acts, and put it in the TIP and hope for the best. So we're going to be working with our board on that, just as we did this time last year. We do believe that the state workload and furloughs create a bottleneck. I think there is some logic to what the director of Caltrans is saying, that no matter whether you have furloughs or not, if there's a deadline and everybody shows up on the last day of the deadline, that's going to be a problem for any workforce. So federal law and a regulation could be changed to permit early advertisement. This is getting into RO2. You can see the sort of chutes and ladders chart on page 6 of slides 11 and 12, and I'm not going to go through that, but this describes the multi-layered process for getting a federal job through to construction. It is extremely difficult. Many of these boxes look simple, but are actually a 42-box checklist of things that have to be done and stuff like that. So this is a very difficult process. We think on slide 13, page 7 now, that we could remove about 4 weeks off the 22 weeks by allowing local agencies to advertise their projects before the grant approval. This is known as obligation, or E76. If we can advertise before the E76 and get the E76 before we award the contract, that will help us tremendously in delivering our jobs.
Is that a statutory restriction?
It's a
federal?
It's a federal, I believe, regulation. It's a regulation that the FHWA imposes on Caltrans. So we need regulatory relief there from the administration, not necessarily a congressional action, though Congress could mandate that for RO2.
Do you know if that was something that was advocated by it was advocated by the state reps when they went back?
Yeah, we got virtually no federal process relief on RO1.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing we could get, this would be an important one.
And this is the Energy and Public Works Committee purview, federally?
You got me there.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Department of Transportation?
Yeah.
He and I would maybe take it out of the House. The FHWA or USDOT take it out.
DOT?
So on slide 14, that's my first bullet, allow at-risk procurement. We have received word from the City of LA. They would like to see expedited eligibility determinations by Caltrans. If a job has been eligible before, it should remain eligible. A new determination may be duplicative. Speaking of duplicative, the 1511 certification process was brand new and duplicates the TIP. We think we can eliminate that process altogether. We want to eliminate fiscal constraint at the TIP stage. As I mentioned, I've got to predict what LA County is going to get and put it in the TIP before Congress acts. If I can put it in the TIP and then take that step of cutting back later, it helps us start the process faster.
Can I ask just a quick clarifying question there? So if you're trying to accelerate the project and anticipate what you're getting, you would be requesting of contractors to bid before they know you even have money secured, right?
Technically, yes. But before you award the contract, you would have that security.
Right.
Liability.
But for them to do, to go out and respond to your request for proposal or whatever you call it, they have to invest a certain amount of money to understand the project. And yeah, there's risk in that. So do you have reason to believe that they are willing to assume that risk?
Well, if the fiscal constraint at the TIP stage, actually the very bullet I'm on, was not waived, then there would be some assurance that at least it fit in the envelope of available funds. So the risk would be minimal. If you did both, if you waived this constraint at the tip stage and allowed early advertisement, you could get into a situation where you might have extra projects out to bid by mistake.
That would not be.
So the two of them may not work well. I don't expect we'll get both of them anyway. So
Someone's going to be sued on that one.
we are required under ARA to submit multiple quarterly reports. Different agencies have different quarterly reports, and we want to consolidate that into one. And again, the City of LA has informed me that they are no longer able to directly invoice Caltrans HQ. They've got to take their invoice now to District 7 and then bring it up to headquarters. This was a red tape cutting thing we did before, which was allow agencies to go straight to HQ. That's been taken back now. So if we could go directly to HQ with our invoices, the City of LA believes our reimbursements would happen faster. Caltrans may have a different opinion about that, of course. The estimates for the Jobs for Main Street Act shown in tables in 15 and 16 on page 8 are there for information. Of course, we don't know yet what the actual funds are going to look like. I want to spend the last few minutes I have on job creation issues. You can see here a picture of Whittier Boulevard traffic signal upgrades. This is an ARA job that's already under construction. There are many others in Los Angeles County, over 100 now already awarded. We have a long history of talking about how jobs are created and how many jobs are created. It begins with a 1996 FHWA study that purported that 42,100 jobs were generated per $1 billion of highway construction investment. The breakdown of the generated jobs is shown there. If you take that $1 billion and deflate it to $2009, you'll find that only 30,000 jobs are created now. And these are jobs generated. They're not necessarily net new jobs, and they're not likely to be permanent jobs. They're also national level jobs. If we look in LA County at how many jobs are created in LA County, we're ignoring some jobs in the state and some in other parts of the nation that are also created. A January 2010 FHWA report found that 14.5 thousand jobs per billion invested is what was created. These are annual full-time equivalent jobs that are created or saved. The data was consolidated from ARA spending data, so we're actually getting actual job creation data now from the ARA data. Consistent with that FHWA report, our Measure R 3010 study, this is where we would deliver our latest sales tax proposal in 10 years instead of 30, would create 14,000 annual FTEs per $1 billion. So our studies are showing similar numbers that the actual data is showing now. The FHWA report and MTA study do not include transportation capacity enhancement jobs, and I want to talk a little bit about that because these are very important jobs. An efficient transportation system benefits a regional economy. If you have a system that saves the motorists, the workers, and the truck drivers time, that's going to have a positive impact on the economy. Our studies are showing that about 7,500 to 9,500 permanent jobs are created per $1 billion of expenditure on capacity improving projects. These are projects that would expand the capacity of the transportation system. I don't think I need to run through all the little bullets there, but those are the jobs I think that transportation advocates really want to get at, is those that flow out of the permanent improvements to the transportation system.
Do you have any harder figures other than an economist's projections based on questionable assumptions?
The best we've got is this consolidated ARA data from the FHWA, which shows about 14,000 jobs per billion.
Does that break it out according to transit versus, other projects? Is there any?
We use the Regional Economic Modeling Incorporated model. It's called a REMI model. It's a firm out of Cambridge, Massachusetts that does a LA County economic model for us. We take our travel demand model outputs and put those into the REMI model as inputs, and that's where we get these jobs that are created from transportation efficiency. There are variations between transit investments and highway construction investments, operating investments and construction investments. They all vary across the map what you're doing. I think the most important jobs to get, again, are the transportation capacity jobs that flow out of improved efficiency on the transportation system.
I'm not an economist, and I don't pretend to understand estimated jobs, whatever else, but do we have more jobs in LA County as a result of the stimulus money? And if so, how many can we tangibly demonstrate?
We've saved more jobs. We haven't actually overcome this.
I've saved a lot of things in life.
Yeah,
but that also is a difficult, tangible thing to demonstrate.
Yeah,
you got to lose it first before you really have saved it.
No, you don't. You save it.
Yeah, but how do you know it wouldn't have saved anyway? You can't take credit for something unless it's gone.
Assuming job growth was constant, which it hasn't been because we have unemployment increasing, then you could do it. But I mean, it's like they count jobs. In essence, he's being very honest and saying those jobs that are created are really not new jobs because they're saving jobs that otherwise would disappear.
Exactly.
Well, to me, that counts.
Without a construction project.
To me, that counts. That helps keep people employed,
Yeah.
And to me, that's as valid as in this climate, in this economy, as creating new jobs.
The investment of 1.1, LA County got almost 1.1 billion in jobs. So I can tell you that with that level of investment, the number of annual FTEs created, full-time equivalent jobs, is something on the order of 14,000 to 15,000 that people are out there working because...
I guess for the purpose of our discussion, if it meets the federal requirements, that's ultimately what we're looking... We want jobs, but we also want to meet the federal requirements. So what you're saying is we have met that with our economic projections and everything.
Also, I should point out, this isn't the only part of the ARA. There are jobs being created in other parts of it. So the overall impact is extremely important, I think, to the populace in LA County.
Okay.
I just have a couple concluding remarks. LA County has exceeded all the ARA deadlines. We had over 100 agencies with ARA projects, 85 cities and 16 transit operators. The success there required advance action in advance of the legislation. Last January, we programmed our money before Congress acted. The population, again, of LA County is equivalent to Michigan's, and AB 3X20 was important to our success. And here I'd say, if it works, don't fix it. And finally, my last point is this at-risk procurement point. I want to make sure that I re-emphasize that. That could save us a great deal of time. Thank you for your time today.
Senator Oropeza.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could share with me in general terms the timeline that the MTA board is under in terms of their prioritization of projects for ARA2. Because you said that there's going to be another
STIM2.
board process, right? Or not ARA2.
STIM2.
STIM2.
The board has not seen anything yet other than what they're reading in the papers.
Okay.
The staff internally is talking about how we would make this wild guess about how much money we're going to get. AB 3X20 doesn't apply to ARA2. So now we have to go back to existing law in California and figure out, well, what would we get? there's an off-the-top amount for the shop, and then 17% of the STIP comes to LA, not 28% our population share, a much smaller amount. So under existing law, we're dealing with less. Who gets the money? The cities,
The
the
board is gonna
projects in Prop
decide that.
1B? And the board's going to have to decide that.
And what is the timeline? That's my question, is what is the, general timeline for those decisions?
Yeah, I would say at this point, we don't have an action pending in January, but I would anticipate that given the timing in Washington, the board may potentially act in February, but we don't have anything set for a specific board action. We are working with our congressional delegation and our 2 senators on how the Stimulus 2 package could shape up, because we still, like David said, we're still in, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. We have one version of the bill, but we don't know what the Senate. What we are doing, though, is we are working with Caltrans to start to put together lists of projects that could meet the 90-day construction deadline. And so after the call that Caltrans organized, we have started looking at our projects, plus we're asking all of our local partners to start submitting projects for that list. So we're collecting those. We're starting to work through the projects to scrub that list. But like I said, they're not just our projects. There are local partners like our cities, municipal operators, and others.
So if I were to call up the transportation department in one of my cities,
Long
they,
Beach.
Let's say Long Beach, they would say to me, yes, they've been outreached to by MTA,
No.
and that they have been solicited for additional. No?
We have not gone out to the 90 cities in LA County and invited them to give us their projects yet.
Have you done that for the city of Los Angeles? Sounds like you have done that for
The city of LA did submit a list to us on its own initiative.
So it's basically up to the, when are you, it's up to the cities
This is
to
something,
know?
this is number one on our list is
Okay.
how much do we think we're going to give to each of the 90 cities and invite them to submit projects? We need to do that.
Yeah, but if we're talking about February, it's
For a board
now
action.
mid-June, January.
Yeah,
How-
I totally get it. We're behind the 8 ball. This is happening
behind.
fast, and we need to get on it. I agree.
So a good thing for me to do would be to call up all my cities and tell their departments of transportation, don't wait to be invited, like the city of LA didn't wait.
Yeah, they
to
could
invite.
start developing what they think they could award
Working on
within 90 days, because we will be coming to them with a request soon.
it. Okay. All right, just so I understand the process.
Okay.
And the counties have been approached, the county of LA has been
The-
approached.
The County of LA Department of Public Works is all over this, and they are looking at their own ability to deliver.
When
But
do you-
again, we have not sent them a formal ask on what they can
Right.
put on the
Well,
list.
so it's the people who know. See, this is what.
So far,
troubles
that's
me.
the way this is coming down.
Yeah.
Well, there was a big call that Caltrans organized, and there were a lot of people on that call. And whenever these kinds of discussions have taken place, we have, and like under the first stimulus bill, most of that money went to the cities. We took most of the highway money and a good chunk of the transit money and sent
I'm
it
not
out.
being
So we need to make sure
critical.
that process follows again.
Right.
Because one of the big issues in Los Angeles County is the whole issue of system preservation. And we have to work with our subregions through the COGS, with all the cities, to identify all the projects that are
I
out
can
there.
appreciate that, but I'm talking about on this fast timeline,
Yeah,
making sure that the local cities know that there is an opportunity here in the same way that LA and LA County know.
And-
Because they're entities that might have, because it's between the last round and this round, they might have teed up some projects that now would make sense for y'all to include. You know what I mean?
And I know that's a big issue for both our board and our new executive director, the CEO of the agency. And I will report back to your office that if there are any problems and there's any stall in getting out to the cities, we'll address it immediately.
Okay.
But we should be reaching out to them now to find out what the cities have. And if there's any lag or problem, I'll get in touch with your offices.
If I may if you indulge me just one more minute. Here's the issue, I think, for the 90 cities in Los Angeles County. The stakes here are much higher. If you have to award your contract within 90 days, you could end up fracturing the money into 90 little pots, and half of them don't make it. So what happens to the money? We lose it.
I understand.
So Metro, in addition to exploring how much cities can get, needs to explore whether we could do one large job and free up a
As long
mini
as there's
stimulus
that
program
freeing up,
within the
and it
county.
does- As long as there's that freeing up and there's just not that sucking sound, you know what I mean?
I get it, yeah. So,
All right, fair enough. Thank you.
Senator Pavlik, you have a question?
Mostly just to get back to the at-risk procurement and what that means. I'm getting it means that to permit early advertisement and eliminating the 1511 certification process. Could someone articulate for me again who's at risk and what does that mean?
if a local agency advertises a job prior to grant approval,
Right.
and there is a piece of paper missing within the grant paperwork, anywhere within it, and they are not ultimately able to secure the grant,
Right.
then the contractor who has spent time bidding on the job, their time will have been wasted because the city will find themselves unable to award the
So
contract.
they voluntarily submit this document knowing they're completely at risk and the money may not materialize.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, there's ways to manage that risk, but that is where the risk would lie.
Totally with them, and it's not a liability exposure for the agent, the county transportation.
I don't think there's a mandate to award a project that's been advertised. You can.
Okay, that's what I needed to know.
Maybe there's an opportunity
Not that I'm
there.
aware of.
Maybe there's an opportunity there to work with the contracting community, because it is a concern that if they expend the funds to bid on a project that's
Just
not,
so they're aware
it's a
of it.
risk.
This is a little different approach that you have, and
But maybe
some
there's an
red flags
opportunity
here, and you should know that, 'cause maybe they should be spending their time submitting a project application for somewhere else, where the money is actually available, rather than.
I know they're all very hungry.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So
They're desperate.
they-
It's just so they know. I
Yeah.
can
And
just-
companies are accustomed to
it's a good
taking on
point.
risk. These bidders are accustomed to taking on risk because there's no guarantee they'll get the contract. It's a
True.
competitive
Right,
process.
right.
So risk is sort of built into the
Yes, I
whole-
know that. I've seen you
Yeah.
open up the bids situation.
Okay.
When you did the first round of ARA money, that was through Speaker Bass's AB 320, I guess, and there was a formula in there. Were you suggesting that there should be a formula for this round of STIM 2
A
money?
clear definition of how much money is available to each region is urgently needed.
Are you suggesting that that formula that was before works, or do you have to see where the money is?
The AB3X formula provided more control at the local level than it did at the state level. It delegated more funds down to the MTA board.
So you liked.
Yes.
and it's also a question of, do you have projects ready to go that can meet that timeline? Because it wouldn't work if we don't have the projects ready. But like I said, we're going through the process of identifying that list now, and the last list we saw on Friday was about $2 billion. So, and that's on a 90-day construction timeline. So we feel we'll be able to meet that deadline, and that a formula such as was in AB 3X20 would work for us.
So you're suggesting, we'll see what STIM 2 is, perhaps through urgency legislation, push through a formula that assists the
Yes, the same
application
kind of
within
thing, the same basic thing as an AB 3X20.
A couple final questions, and we'll release you. You mentioned in your slide presentation that ABX 320 was important to your success. Can you expand on that? Why was that important?
It clearly defined how much money we were going to get, and it did so early enough in the process that we were able to use the bill as a way of rationalizing the transportation improvement program actions we had to take with the FHWA. They will not allow a project into the TIP unless you can show them the money.
Okay.
So we were able to do that with that bill.
All right.
I think if I could just add, it also allowed us to keep, to use the funds on bond projects, so we were able, as the director mentioned, to fund what would have been bond-funded projects, and then when the bonds flow, reimburse the shop. So that was also a successful mechanism, which might work again in this case.
It clearly defined who got the freed-up bond money when, and that was important.
Okay. And then finally, you commented about being able to obligate the funds quickly. Where are you in your contract awards? Unless I missed something, I didn't hear you answer that part of the question.
Between October and December, we're awarding a construction contract every business day. So we've gone from 28 awarded contracts in September to over 100 today. The rate at which we are awarding those contracts is increasing. We have a total of about 250 jobs to get out. They are all through grant approval, so they can all be in advertisement. There's nothing holding a city council from doing that.
You have 250 more to get out? So
Yes.
is that 250 days?
No, 250 total, and 100 of them have been awarded.
So you have 150 to go, so it's 150 days at your rate?
It could be. I think the rate's increasing now over time, so I don't anticipate it'll be 150 days.
Okay.
I think it'll be faster.
I'm not sure what
Yeah.
that percentage is. It's probably around 60% or so.
It's a mountain of data to go through. In the time available to get ready for the hearing, we couldn't get that, go out to every city with an unawarded contract and find out their schedule. So I don't know precisely, but
60%.
my guess about it is within 3 months, we're going to be through the process completely and all those projects out there under construction.
All right. Any last questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll call up now Randy Rentschler, Metropolitan Transportation Commission.
Chairman Huff, thank you so much. I also have with me my associate, Ross McCune, who, if you ask too hard of a question, I'll have to look at him. While a handout's coming around about our obligations in the Bay Area, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. The first thing is that AB 3X20 was a really good bill. It worked for the state of California. It worked clearly for the Bay Area. There's going to be an opening of the Caldecott Tunnel on Friday this week, and if it wasn't for AB 3X20, that would likely not be happening. It gave the state a great deal of flexibility to deal with the many issues you're dealing with up here with respect to the state budget by freeing up the bond funds to do other things such as education and other priorities. So all in all, this was a good bill. There's a lot of Me Too that I can just say about the presentation you just heard. There's a whole lot of things that our friends in Los Angeles went through that I don't need to cover again. The issue of the 1511 certification is one that I am going to point out. It is something we can do here in California to help this process go through. Most of the things that can make this process go through are going to be centered in Washington, D.C. I will leave your staff a list of 9 items that we're shopping around in Washington, D.C. We have shared this with the department and other regions so we can try to make some headway on some of the paperwork requirements that Washington has on us that makes this go somewhat slower than it need to. I know that Randy Iwasaki just displayed a good deal of political acumen with a question about some of the things dealing with the furloughs. And while I think it's appropriate in any kind of a hearing to talk about the things that we can all do better, I think it's important also to say that Caltrans did a great job getting this stuff out. In the Bay Area, there's 125 project sponsors for these and transit monies. People like Ross and people at Caltrans, many of them under furlough, did a lot of work to make this happen. But to say the furloughs didn't have an effect, I think is not the case. And it's not just at Caltrans. It's at the State Historic Preservation Office. It's at all the resource agencies. Transportation is a complicated subject that has a rule book probably 5 or 6 inches deep for any project we got to get through. And it's all sorts of folks in all sorts of areas that have to okay it. Even projects that are in the right-of-way, things that seem to be easy are not. And so the furloughs did matter. Real quick on just some of the basic facts here that I know you've covered with other areas, but we should cover them here. I have two charts for you. The first one is a pie chart. It looks like this. And the point of this chart is to show you all of the funds that came to the Bay Area, either directly from Congress or through AB 3X20. That's the chart. It shows you where we spent the money. I think it's important for us to tell you where we're spending the money. Specifically on the left-hand side are the exact projects we spent the money that came to the Bay Area as a result of AB 3X20. I've mentioned the Cul-de-Sac, local streets and roads benefited. We also allocated some funds for transit rehab, about $15 million. I-580 and I-680 are some potential express hot lanes in the Bay Area, obviously state highway account funds, and T funds, transportation enhancement funds. We advanced some projects that were already in the STIP. So I wanted to make sure that you knew how we're spending the money. T is a transportation enhancements. It's a program that is a formula, 10% of the surface transportation funds, yet another, yeah, exactly. They're projects such as bikeways, things like that. There's a whole host of them. I suspect there's 100 different definitions of what one is. Turning the page to the bar chart, the bar in blue is how much money Congress gave us, and again, also through AB 3X20. You can see the red bar obligations. The Bay Area has obligated all the money. We've met the federal requirement 100%. By the way, this is the highway side. I have transit if you wish to see it, but it's really, I thought maybe not the subject of this hearing. On the yellow bars, these are our contracts awards. So you can see we're doing pretty good on the Bay Area vis-a-vis the state, and we think vis-a-vis the nation. A couple of the projects simply are projects that are tough. The T projects tend to be tough. Also, the construction season, as you can tell by the weather outside, has passed us, so we're going to have to wait on some of these. Past that, Senator, I'm here to answer any questions you have. I wanted to be brief, and I'm hopeful this information is useful to you.
Questions? Senator Oropeza?
I just wondered if you had a view on some of the issues related to the formulas for next round, or the parameters that the Fed set around money, in response to what LAMTA expressed. Do you have common views, different views? I'd be interested in hearing your point.
Well, I think often on policy, our friends in Los Angeles and up in the Bay Area are going to be singing from the same hymn book. We're big metro areas. The STIP formulas, by their nature, don't necessarily benefit big metro areas, but the STP formula does, its population. It also allows certain flexibility, although LA is 1 county, the Bay Area is 9. So we were able to focus all of our AB 3X20 money on a single project, the Cul-de-Sac, where if it went through the STIP, it would be shattered into 9 counties, and it becomes much more difficult to meet tight federal guidelines. So I think on the policy side, we're going to be the same. But as you know, we're going to have an honest dispute whenever we're, talking about who gets how much money.
Right. But I meant in terms of some of the suggestions on, like, streamlining the federal process.
Look, we're a big Me Too.
Are those issues
yes.
relevant for you?
Yes.
I mean, do you have difficulty with the 22-week, and have
yes.
you looked at ways that you might also make suggestions at the federal level?
Yes,
you
absolutely.
concur with the recommendations that LAMTA has?
Absolutely. We have our list of 9 things. I will lead them with your staff. I think one way to think about it is that if we're going to be doing actions every day for transportation, there's going to be a big, complicated process to deal with that. If there's an expectation that this is a one-time thing, we're doing stimulus, hey, let's just focus on the fact that this is a one-time thing, and let's forget some of these very difficult, painful rules that we have to follow, in some cases that ought to be followed. But I think one way to think about the problem is many of these rules in transportation were created at a time when big projects were being built. They were there to stop abuses. Many cities across this country got mowed down without a proper hearing. And there's many places that still resent that. So we have this rule book now for this incredibly complicated process to make sure that bad outcomes don't take place. But this rule book doesn't really apply to the world that we're really inhabiting right now, which is a rehabilitation world, often staying in the same right-of-way. But the rule book is the same. And the obligations on the state are the same, and they're serious ones, and they take them seriously. So in part, there's a mismatch that's taking place, and I think a stimulus process is an example of that.
Any other questions? Quick question. Can you quantify which type of jobs create more jobs than others? Have you found any relation or correlation?
Well, Senator Huff, at the risk of getting way past my expertise, I do think that we can say that the strict deadlines...
It seems to be very subjective anyway, so you might as well weigh in.
Yeah, well, don't let that stop me, obviously. These very quick deadlines made us do certain kinds... That's right. Made us do certain kinds of projects. Rehab on the streets is one. Frankly, that's a materials-focused work. Often, look, it's just oil. It's what it is. I mean, often imported, probably. That's what it is. It's completely mechanized now, so there's probably not very many people doing that work, okay? So it's probably materials-based and not labor-based. But it can be done quickly, and it meets the deadlines. If we do a more strategic investment, it's going to take a longer period of time. But those are the jobs that you want. The Golden Gate Bridge and the Bay Bridge weren't shovel-ready when the stock market crashed in 1929, okay? It took them 3 years, not 3 months, to get the money obligated and spent. And those are the kind of projects that benefited the economy for decades, for generations, really, even to this day. And so to a certain extent, we have to know what our focus is. If the goal is to spend the money right away and get it into the economy, then fine. Our entities can make that happen. If the focus is to try to be a game changer and benefit generations into the future, then I think folks in your positions have to have some patience on the matter, because game changers don't happen overnight. And considering the rule book we have to play with, it's going to take a couple of years.
Well, and these are federal funds. We're not really setting the rules, although
That's correct.
To the degree that we can help shape them and make them more realistic, we're certainly trying to be engaged in that way. To that degree, do you agree with the same formula for the AB 20X3?
Yes.
That works well for you?
We think it worked. We think, frankly, if there's a second stimulus, this game plan should be done again. All the basic facts are in place this time as they were there. The state has bond issues, bond projects that can be advanced. We think this worked pretty well.
Okay.
May I suggest Chair Huff, the majority and minority convey that?
Yes, we can certainly back up the information we've heard here today and
That's got to be an urgency.
send a letter on or something.
So Republicans and Democrats would be highly interested in supporting
Yes, very good. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And call up now Catherine Matthews, Rural Counties Task Force.
Good afternoon, Senator Huff. I'm Catherine Matthews. I am the Executive Director of the El Dorado County Transportation Commission, and I do serve as Chair of the Rural Counties Task Force. And to maybe explain to you, if you aren't familiar with what that organization is, it's an organization that was established by the California Transportation Commission in the late 80s to advise the CTC on issues that were unique to rural counties. And I think it might also be helpful, since you've heard from LA and MTC, to explain to you a little bit about what rural counties are that I represent. I did survey our 26 members. I received responses from about half of them. And we have rural counties who have less than 1 PY working on regional transportation planning issues. Not just ARA, but the whole gamut of regional transportation issues. And some of these very small counties are indicating to me that they have spent, since the first ARA, about 30% of their staff time on delivering these projects. So it is a very heavy burden on rural counties, and you've heard about the processes from the federal perspective, and you heard Mr. Yale indicate, well, if a job is less than $500,000, it's not worth going through a federal process. Many of my small rural counties receive less than $500,000 and still needed to go through a federal process. So if we could add another zero on the left-hand side of that decimal point for the rural counties, same amount of process, they could deliver projects and be very comfortable with that. Alpine County received less than $1,000 for a federalized transportation enhancement project. They donated that to a neighboring county, and we're seeing that a lot amongst the rurals. The dollar amounts were so small, and the process is so burdensome. The rules, as have been mentioned, the rules set up for ARA apply to transportation projects, but this is a job creation economic stimulus process, and if these rules could be changed to match that mission better, it would be very helpful. And I do concur, and my counties do concur with those recommendations that were offered up by MTA and MTC. Those process relief would be very, very helpful. Beyond that, for rural counties, it's been indicated that this is a reimbursement program. Many rural counties are suffering significant financial hardship. It's very important, if we have another stimulus bill, that the funds that come to the rural counties via Prop 42 and HUDA are there, because those are the funds that they're going to use to front this money, and then they need to get reimbursed. So that's significant from the rural perspective as well. I am going to have a different opinion for you with respect to AB 3X20. AB 3X20 does use a formula. That formula is an STP formula, and that formula is based on population. Rural counties are big losers when that formula is applied. And if you look across the state of California at the winners and the losers, there were over 30 counties who were losers and 7 or 8 who were winners with that formula over the existing process absent AB 3X20, which would have been a combination of STP and the STIP, State Transportation Improvement Program formula. And the significant difference is that through the STIP formula, it goes through a division by north-south, and it goes through a formula that factors road miles as well as population. And so for many rural counties who have a very sparse population but a lot of road miles, that formula is much more beneficial to a rural county. I did ask my Public Works fellows if they could quantify for me some jobs. In a very general way, the same figure that Mr. Yale provided, only we use millions rather than billions. We said 14 family wage jobs for every 1 million. Same formula. But for one of my specific jobs in my county in El Dorado, it was a $1.8 million rural road rehab project. 110,000 of that was labor related, and it created 4,829 hours of job creation. So we are quantifying by hours. But it really does depend on whether your job is labor intensive or materials intensive. But even a materials intensive, there is that multiplier factor as you're looking at job creation. Our process in a rural county isn't as laborious as MTC or MTA because we're much smaller and we do have fewer jurisdictions. To let you know what El Dorado has done in preparation for STEM 2, we did participate on the Caltrans call, which I believe was 2 weeks ago. Since that time, I've been able to pull together my policy advisory committee, which is my public works directors and Caltrans and our MPO. We have developed our list of projects according to the STP rules, federally eligible, environmentally cleared, and we've factored pavement condition index, ADT, those kinds of things, looked at shovel ready. We have our projects developed, ready to go, both for the same dollar amount as the last stimulus through the AB 3X20 formula, or also then through an existing allocation absent AB 3X20, which would be the STIP formula. We have 2 tiers. We're taking that to my board the first week of February. We've contacted our MPL already to program a lump sum in the TIP. So we will be ready. But we do concur with the time frame that has been offered up to you already, about 22 weeks. That really is the time frame that we're looking at. So any relief to help this process really match the goal of economic stimulus and job creation would be very helpful. I also wanted to let you know that through my survey of the rural counties, those that responded was about half of them. Of those 11 counties, we were looking at $32 million across the 11 counties of stimulus money through the RSTP formula. $30 million of that has been obligated, and not that much has been awarded across all of these counties. In El Dorado, I like to hold my county up as a shining example. My county is 100% awarded, 100% completed, and we have already undergone our audit with FHWA. So we are ready to go. If you have any questions, okay, I'd certainly be happy to answer them. We are one of the larger rural counties. My county Department of Transportation is a very effective project delivery team. Separate department with focus. Right. And I have had direction from my board to expedite, and my board's been wonderful to work with through this process. They understand the goal of job creation and getting these projects out early. And I have a staff of 6. Some of these counties have a staff of half. It's the same process, whether you're talking about $25,000 or $25 million for a project.
You know, part of the frustration we have, I guess, as policymakers is rural areas just aren't like suburban or urban areas. You know, it's not one size fits all the state.
Absolutely.
Yet it's very difficult to nuance that when we do things. So we end up with bills like the AB 23X that don't benefit your area much. You know, everybody else is real happy with it. So it kind of begs the question, is there an allocation formula or something other than that, or what we've done in the past that would help you better given your constraints that you have?
I think if you're looking at the economically disadvantaged areas of the state, many of those are the rural counties when you look at income levels. I think we can deliver. I've shown that almost 100% of the rural county money has been obligated. My county has delivered. I think that and the gentleman from MTC and MT are correct. I mean, we need to know what the formula is quickly so that we can begin our processes now. But combination RSTP, STIP formula, a hybrid formula would very definitely benefit the rural counties.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions by the members? All right, thank you very much for your testimony.
You're welcome.
And next we'll call up Julie Buren, Contra Costa County Public Works Director. Did I mutilate your name or get close?
You were right on.
Okay, good.
Which
Thank
is
you.
unusual. So
every now and then it
works.
works.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I am Julie Buren. I am representing today the California State Association of Counties and the League of California Cities. I am, in my real life, the Public Works Director for Contra Costa County, and I'm also President-elect for the California State Association of County Engineers. And I just, going last, a lot has been said, so I'm going to be pretty quick on this.
You get to do cleanup, though. That's like really cool.
Let you ask me questions, but just wanted to give a little bit of the local perspective on what the local delivery process is with these federal funds. And I am in the MTC region, and in our region, the local process worked very, very well with our Caltrans local assistants, our regional CMAs, and MTC all working together with the jurisdictions to make these projects go forward. And we've been very successful. Statewide, all of the local projects will be obligated by the deadline. So I think we have a very good track record. Some of the issues that we faced in approaching this is locals do go through a different process than the state on federally funded projects. We have to go through Caltrans local assistance to get our projects approved. Caltrans administers the federal process for the locals. And one little hiccup with the ARA funds this year was the 1511 certification was new. And the DBE process, the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise process, changed right in the middle of it. So we all had to go to our local boards, our city councils, get a new program in place before we could even go out to advertise projects. So that, I know in my case, that delayed us about 2 months on delivering our ARA project. So that won't be true in the next time. So some of those issues, I think, have been ironed out. Shovel ready is maybe a little different definition for local agencies as well, because we cannot go through a federal environmental process until we have federal funding. And so we can't even start really that process. So for us, shovel ready was really looking at local rehab projects that were within the right-of-way, that were going to be fairly simple environmental projects to deliver, but they did not have environmental clearance going forward. So I think when you look at it in those terms, we did a remarkable job in getting these projects delivered and through the federal process in such a short time from the local point of view. I think it's also important to note that during this time of ARA stimulus funds coming into the regions and to the local agencies, we were having our Prop 42 funds and our gas tax dollars deferred. So money that we would have been spending to also do projects.
Is there static on the line here?
Sorry, I just had to put that in there. But again, for my county, we delivered a $1.8 million rehab project on a rural county highway. We would normally have a $2 million out to contract surface treatment projects on an annual basis that we didn't do this year because we didn't have our local dollars coming in. So it's hard for me to talk about job creation when there was a certain amount of money that just didn't get out. And we're not sure next year what we're going to do on that either. So just had to get that in there. The California State Association of Counties and the League of Cities did poll their members. We didn't get 100% response, but a good response. And based on that, there is the ability to deliver about $1.7 billion in local projects if given 180 days. Going down from that to less days, it gets to be less money. But there's a lot of money ready. There's a lot of projects that could be delivered in very short order. I'll say that again, $1.7 billion on the local system. And so I think I'm just going to stop and let you ask me questions if you have any.
What was the time frame again?
That was 180 days.
180.
For the counties, we asked for 90 days, 120, and 180. And this is counties, this isn't cities. It was $300 million in in 90 days. It was $500 million in 120 days, and $750 million in 180 days. I think I have those numbers right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Senator Pavley?
No, I was just touch on whether that formula works for.
Yeah, how did that formula work for you?
Well, being in the MTC region in Contra Costa County, it worked well for me. Speaking on behalf of CSAC and the League, it depends on what part of the state you're from. So I'm going to let Deanne take that one.
You're not monolithic either, right?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Deanne Baker, representing the California State Association of Counties. We did support the bill. It was quite a few months of negotiation to get us to that point. We knew that we were under crunch time and trying to meet some of the timelines, so we were able to support the bill from the statewide association's perspective. Having said that, that, we recognize that there was a disadvantage to a number of the rural counties, and we know working with Caltrans, they attempted to program some SHOP projects in those jurisdictions to kind of offset some of those losses. I don't know what the opportunity is to try and do something like that. Another alternative is to also potentially wash those federal dollars with state dollars for the rural areas so they don't have the administrative burden of trying to deliver. That's something that we do for a portion of federal money for some of the rural areas. And so maybe we have more opportunity. I don't know, the time seems to be approaching quickly perhaps, but if we have more of an opportunity, there might be other suggestions as to how to provide some relief to the rural agencies.
Okay, appreciate your input because that is helpful. Well, go ahead and ask her.
Curious.
I don't know.
Where would the money come from to provide that relief for rural counties regarding the matching fund requirements?
Sure. Well, typically, there's a mix of money that's going into funding these projects, whether it's 1B or state highway account or gas tax. So it typically has had to happen through either Caltrans or a regional agency that would have other revenue sources, state revenue sources perhaps available to them. I mean, all money's tight right now, but there might be that opportunity within the state. In this case, it would have to be the state to be able to do it for the rural areas. But obviously concentrating, as you've heard, the burden is significant to deliver federal dollars, so concentrating them in any way the state can would be certainly more efficient.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you very much for your testimony. I do appreciate it. Brought some good ideas. We'll see how we work with that. And that concludes our official presentations. We're going to do public comments now. We'll give you a maximum of 2 minutes. Try to be brief and concise if you can. We'll see how many people we have lining up to do this. We'll give you your full 2 minutes. Don't worry.
Stephanie Burry with SCIU Local 1000. I just want to make a comment. SCIU Local 1000. I just want to make a comment about the furloughs. Most employees at Caltrans are on self-directed furloughs, which means that they're not taking them 3 a month. That doesn't mean that and that they will eventually have to take them, maybe all at one time. But they're still getting about a 15% pay cut, so they're still facing significant issues at home. So they still have to face those issues, so that could still be having a big impact on them. Additionally, most of them are being paid with federal money, so that's the question of where's that money going and what is it being used for. So, and then additionally, the lawsuits that are being decided, the question is, how is that money going to be getting paid back to those employees, and if the judgments are made and they're required to be paid back pay. So just a couple comments.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Please come up and state your name.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm Erin Steve. I'm transportation advocate with CalPERG. I'm here because there's a study that I'd like to share that I think is pertinent to the discussion, as well as making 2 recommendations. So CalPERG, along with Smart Growth America, studied stimulus spending and job creation in relation to transportation, and we used data from the Congressional House Transportation Committee that they gathered with the ARA reporting. And what we found was that, as an aggregate, public transportation created twice as many jobs as highway spending projects. In California, the numbers are even more skewed in favor of public transit creating jobs. So in light of that, we are a group that's a huge proponent of public transportation. So we would like to urge this committee to, when looking at the jobs bill or in the future, the reauthorization of the transportation spending bill, we want to make the recommendation of putting more money into public transit if our concern is creating jobs. The facts show that public transportation does create more jobs than highway projects. And then secondly, as Caltrans and regional agencies receive money, there is often an opportunity with STP funds to flex it over to public transportation. So we'd like to also make that recommendation that whenever possible, we should be flexing over STP funds to public transportation. Just once again with the theme, if our concern is creating jobs, the data shows that public transportation creates at a minimum twice as many jobs as highway spending. Thank you.
Thank you. I think just in response to that, there are some guidelines spelled out to us, and I believe it was 10% for operations, which would be public transit as opposed to the capital type outlay.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other public comment? Going once, going twice? All right, seeing no more, we're concluding with that. Let me just say that I think it's been productive. Certainly, I have a little better understanding of, how this is being implemented, and, clearly I think we have a challenge hitting a 90-day timeline, and if we can expand that, it's not in our purview to do that, but if we can help affect that, clearly I think California and Caltrans is probably in a little better shape than most other states to be able to react quickly, and if they can't do it, then I'm not sure the other states are going to be any quicker, so we shouldn't be losing the funding. And so if the federal request is that we get things and jobs in place, then perhaps they're going to have to relax things a tad and to accommodate that. Policymakers come up with great policy. It's not always workable. That sounds like this tight timeline is one of those. But anyway, I do appreciate everybody's input here. It has helped us get our arms around this a little bit better. Stay tuned as we go down this journey together, and hopefully through these jobs that will be created, some of them saved, we will find ourselves turning a corner economically, and life will be rosy once again. But until then, we continue to do the best we can. Thank you very much for joining us today. Meeting's over.